We want to welcome you to this Love First podcast conversation. This is a part of a series where we are sharing in conversations about disabilities and special needs. And if you've shared in all the conversations, you know that some of the people that have participated are people who navigate their own disabilities. Some of them are doing that with family members with disabilities and special needs. Some are professionals in the field. And if you've watched all the conversations, there's some overlap in all of that. And so I want to thank you for joining us for this conversation. And today we have four wonderful people that are joining us. And so I'd like for them to introduce themselves. And so we're going to begin with Alicia. And so would you just introduce yourself to our listeners and tell us a little bit about your journey in disabilities and special needs?
Love first, I know. Love first, I know. Lord, take control. Lord, take control. Love first in my soul. Love first in my soul. Lord, take control.
Sure. My name's Alicia Stryker. My husband Joe and I have three kids. We have 6-year-old Nolan, 10-year-old Vivian, and then we have, 9-year-old Vivian, and then we have 11-year-old Wyatt. Wyatt does have autism. He was diagnosed exactly 10 years ago in April 2010. It's a very memorable moment. But we're happy to be here. We've been on this road for a while now, and happy to be having this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. And Amanda?
Hi, my name is Amanda Ippolito, and I'm the mother of Joey, Joey Ippolito. Joey is on the autism spectrum. He also has an IQ of 40, and we've been members at North Atlanta for a little over 21 years, and I'm just excited to have the opportunity to talk about this today.
That's wonderful. And hopefully, maybe Joey will join us along the way. Who knows, right?
Who knows?
Okay, Frank?
I'm Frank Seward, my wife Tina Seward, and let's see, it's Matthew Seward who's our son, and he was diagnosed with high-level autism, and it's been an interesting ride, to say the least.
No doubt. And for our listeners, they will, perhaps if they've watched other conversations in the series, they might be wondering if Tina is your wife, who was on another call, and that's the Tina you're talking about. And then, of course, Alicia already brought up her husband, Joe, who also joined us for another call. So we're really glad to get those perspectives. And Beth, would you introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, my name is Beth Cravata. I'm a special ed teacher. I taught in the public schools for quite a while in New Hampshire, and then we moved here to Atlanta. I actually taught at the preschool for a bit, and then I actually taught at the Swift School, which is a private school for kids with dyslexia and other language-based learning differences. So I taught there for a few years as well. And now I'm an academic tutor, special ed tutor, primarily working with kids with dyslexia and other language-based learning differences. So.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. Thank you all for joining us. You know, Alicia, you alluded to that day, that day in April. Could you tell us a little bit about what that day was like for you and how you remember it, how you think about how that day impacted your life? Wyatt's your oldest. He's your firstborn. And so can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. With him being our oldest, we didn't know exactly what to look for or signs or anything. So everything appears normal. But you're also a little bit more paranoid too about things, right? You're so worried, are they doing things exactly as they should be? We started noticing things with Wyatt between the 12-month and the 18-month mark. More so just not participating. He was in a little Georgia Tech preschool, but not participating with other kids, just kind of sitting with the books. We thought maybe he was just like his father, he's just after his daddy, quiet, wants to sit with a book. But they weren't worried, but there was a gut instinct in me that something was off. So Joe came to our 18-month checkup. He never came to doctor's appointments after the first few weeks. I was very much pregnant with our daughter. But Joe and I both had a concern that it was not right, even though no one else seemed to pick up on it. Anyways, what was interesting was Wyatt started flapping that week, and his little daycare was doing a big dance at school, a dance with the little kids, and we thought it was something he learned at school. And the doctor immediately said, "How long's he been doing that?" And I said, "Oh, he just started it a week ago. It's like a little dance at school." And he's like, "No, that's not a dance. That's hand flapping. Let's talk some more." And went through the discussion and basically ended it with, "We think your son may have autism. You need to go to someone that can take a deeper look." Again, I was very pregnant. Just really already was emotional as it was. But, Joe and I, instead of taking "oh, he's not," we took it as we knew something was wrong and we need to do something. Immediately that afternoon, we reached out to the only friend I knew, was somebody I grew up in the church with back in Huntsville, to get their insight. They had a son with autism. I didn't know much about it. It was a Friday afternoon, so we spent the weekend researching. And then Monday, I started making phone calls to figure out how we could get him evaluated. And that's what started the whole journey. But I remember it like it was yesterday. Something, we always say our lives before the autism diagnosis and our life thereafter.
I've noticed that both Frank and Amanda were nodding at different points as you were describing your situation. Frank, what are some ways that what Alicia described relates with you, and what are some ways that your journey has been also different?
It's the flow, not necessarily flow, but awareness of something is not right. Matthew basically was fine with meeting all the development goals to about a year. He was about a year and a half old, and then is like a train wreck. And that's when we started doing some research. And then we took him in to get tested at about 3, and that's when we got the diagnosis. And it's quite correct. It's the before and then after the diagnosis that life just changes.
Yeah. We've heard the words throughout these conversations where we begin to try to talk about typical or normal, or the way we imagine things were going to go. Most of the time, probably by the time that we come around to having children, no matter how someone enters parenthood, there are some expectations that are built off of the people around us. And so that does create certain thoughts or certain dreams or certain aspirations. And this changes that dramatically. Amanda, tell us a little bit about your journey.
Okay. So things seem to be fairly normal with Joey. He's my second child. I didn't really see a lot of differences. Mm-hmm. But, around that same time frame, I will say that thing that was very significant when Joey was 18 months, and I want to say I'm not against vaccinations, but when he was 18 months and he received his vaccinations, he had been sick on a prior well visit, where he was scheduled to have the vaccine. So there was more. He was given a double dose of one of the vaccines, and that night he had a seizure. And I just remember he had his back to me, and I remember watching him. I could see he was trembling, and I ran over and I flipped him around and I looked at his face, and I was so terrified. And you want to talk about bargaining with God and everything. And then after that day, Joey wasn't the same. they did confirm he had a febrile seizure. And when he came home, he was a different child. He did not, the little language that he had, the few words that he spoke, he didn't use anymore. And all that he wanted to do was sit and watch Teletubbies or anything like that. It was no longer he wanted to follow me around and he wanted to play with his toys. Suddenly he didn't have any motivation to do any of those things. It was terrifying.
Mm-hmm. For the three of you that have spoken so far, did any of you have a close family member growing up that you remember that had a disability?
I did not.
Strangely enough, my brother Claude has dyslexia. Never a bad version of it, but the thing is that it was never diagnosed, and we never noticed. Although we should have in hindsight, considering his very poor writing.
Mm-hmm. Can you relate to that, Beth, what he's describing about dyslexia?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's always interesting, like in the brain research of dyslexia and autism, it's almost like they're kind of the antithesis of each other. Like with a dyslexic person, I always kind of like to think of it as like the forest, like they can see the forest and may not see the actual tree, whereas maybe a person with autism would see the tree. And sort of I don't know, that seems to be super helpful with me when I'm working with students, because at Swift School, we did have some students with autism. And it just kind of helped me sort of when I'm working with them to really understand really truly how the brain is wired. And I think that's really important to really truly understand how they do take in information, how they regurgitate information. But yeah, certainly the written piece of it is a huge. Spelling, encoding, comprehension, certainly, and even in oral expression. So yeah, for sure, I can absolutely identify with that.
Alicia, is that resonating with you?
Yeah, our daughter has dyslexia.
Mm-hmm.
So we've been on that journey as well. We interviewed at Swift for her. So that's been kind of there's some parallels for sure, some unique qualities between the two, but we've been on that journey with her as well. And that's kind of had its own unique, challenges for sure.
Yeah. Now go ahead, Amanda.
I lied. I have dyslexia, but I don't really view it as a as a disability, because I had a good teacher that helped me overcome a lot of it. But parables were always a problem for me.
There you go. Well, I was actually going to ask you to talk to us about something, Amanda, that you brought up that I understand that it can be a very explosive topic, but you didn't bring it up in that way. And it's this wonderment about vaccines. And you said in the same statement that you saw what appeared to be a direct link, maybe in your son, Joey, but that you're not against vaccines. How have you thought through that?
Well, obviously vaccines save lives overall. And I'm aware of that. I know that, even today, there's an ingredient in vaccines. It's a preservative with some mercury. And I do believe that even though it's really hard to find on the package insert, you can find it if you know how. And, the doctor swore that it wasn't in there, but I pulled out the insert and showed it to him and he was aghast. But I believe that some humans they can't tolerate that. And, I think the fact that he was given a double dose of one of his vaccines, it just seemed like it was an immediate change. And, but, certainly I don't want the whole world to get sick. And I don't believe in that. And Joey gets vaccines, but they're spaced out, I didn't continue to do it on that same schedule. I just spaced them out further, and he's the healthiest kid I know in that regard.
Right. So I think one of the reasons I wanted to lean into that with you was I think that it's hard for us sometimes to tolerate what I might call a living conversation, where rather than just talking about something and ending it with some firm, immovable conclusion, the living conversation says that there's nuances to this conversation that need to be listened to, highlighted, and thought through. And that's part of what you're doing, right now, Beth, I'd like you to share a little bit from your perspective. What is it like when a family comes to you, different families, and you see that sometimes either, like in the case of Joe and Alicia, they were on the same page. And then sometimes you might see caregivers or family members that are not on the same page with specifically their child who is coming for therapy. What are some things that you've seen there, some experiences that you've had?
I think right off the bat, I work with a student right now who is he's now a sixth grader, diagnosed with dyslexia, and probably I think in fourth grade is when I began working with him. But because the public schools don't recognize dyslexia, she has actually decided not to even tell the school that her son has dyslexia. So I think, so really the conversation becomes with a lot of the kids I work with is kind of being their own advocate. And I certainly respect that mom's decision. And I do believe that dyslexia is a superpower. I mean, I do believe that. But at the same time, so having that honest conversation with mom, she's a single mom, was super important to, so that she could talk through not the dyslexia, certainly the dyslexia, but also have that conversation with her son and sort of celebrate it, right? So celebrate how his brain is wired. And so that, that was an honest conversation to have with her and then to have with him. I'm trying to think of some other situations. Sorry, Don, kind of drawing a blank as far as with families. But yeah, I do believe that it's just being honest. And I believe it was Connie that brought up diagnosis and really being understanding and being honest about the diagnosis. And I think that's so important for us to truly understand these kids. And like I was talking about before, kind of having that paradigm shift, like really certainly understanding their weaknesses, but really honing in on their strengths, right? And just celebrating those. And I think so often we're trying to find a cure. And I know specifically for the kids I work with, there's no cure for it. We teach to it. We teach to their strengths. We teach to what they can do, and which I think is a beautiful thing. And we certainly have a lot of success with that, right? When we celebrate who they are and how God made them.
Yes. Some of the resources that people on this call, as well as some others on the other calls we've been doing, whether it's documentaries they send me or research or the CDC or a variety of those things, things that's been stressed over and over and over again is that making a clear commitment to living into someone's strengths, well, that's something every human needs, but specifically, obviously, because of the way society is functioning and the way the world is built, people who are dealing with navigating a disability or a special need can quickly find themselves almost in a place where nothing around them is built for them, so to speak. That the world is built apparently for someone else. Very quickly, it can begin to feel like that there's something so wrong with me. Nothing about me is right, and nothing about me is a strength, versus helping someone to actually lean into their strengths. I think that's just really, really important. I'd like to pose another question to the group. So on this call, we've talked about the different ages. So let's really quickly, let's refresh everyone again. Alicia, how old is Wyatt?
11.
Right. And then Amanda, how old is Joey?
Joey will be 21 on June 14th.
Okay. And then Frank, how old is Matthew?
Let's see, he's 21 going on 22.
Okay. So let's start there, because one of the things that happens is children age out of opportunities, programs, schools, right? And specifically for Matthew, that aging out is not far away. And tell us a little bit about what it's like as your child ages out of particular opportunities as he was growing older, and how you anticipate the change that is coming before his 22nd birthday.
Well, actually, most of the changes are going to occur on his 22nd birthday, but the thing is to get him prepared for these changes beforehand.
Mm-hmm.
Because basically Strive education is going to be over. And he's going to have the responsibility of being his own advocate in the job place and where he lives.
Mm-hmm.
And he's going to have enough skills to be able to care for himself.
Yes, yes. Amanda, do you want to speak to this process of aging out of aging out of and into other responsibilities, opportunities, and challenges?
Well, Don, I think that, since Joey was diagnosed at 5, because at that time they wouldn't diagnose someone with autism until they were 5.
Mm-hmm.
But, I already knew. And really from that moment, I wondered what that day would look like. And I guess the difficult part about it is, what I see for my son is that he's not going to be able to live the pursuit of happiness, and, the things that he wants are what are, will he see those things, and how will I be able to help him? Joey is, in my opinion, very functional socially, and everywhere he goes, every workplace that he's been, they've been very, very happy with his work. Mm-hmm. But without that support that he's provided through the school system, I don't know what it's going to look like. I mean, I'd love to see Joey in a community home, a group home somewhere in Dunwoody, working a part-time job, and, getting more involved in with the young adults that are similar.
Yes.
But I also have to say, though, that, Joey doesn't see any problems with, anything. And so, he doesn't always even want to be with similar people.
Yes. Yes.
So it's an interesting situation.
Yes. And you bring up something very powerful, is that the perspective of someone looking into the life of a person walking with a disability or navigating disability can be fundamentally different than the person themselves, and how they perceive it and how they might think about life and describe it. In this conversation, I think it's always helpful for us to be reminded that in different ways of describing maybe families of disabilities, sometimes it comes through illness or injury, right? And then, but other times, of course, it comes in other ways where someone is dealing with a developmental disability or some physical disability. Some who have been on our calls, there was something that happened during the birth process, and so they remarked that they've never known life any other way. Whereas for some folks, it was an injury or an illness that brought this about. And again, for them individually, they can remember life before and life after, just like you all have described as parents, life before diagnosis, life after diagnosis, changing broadly, you know. Alicia, why don't you keep us walking down this path of aging out of and into various opportunities in our society for people who are navigating disabilities.
Yeah, we, even though Wyatt's got a ways to go, he's a rising sixth grader. It's something we're already concerned about, already thinking about. We set up a special needs trust years ago, my father, before he passed away. So that was one of his goals before he passed, was to set it up so that he would be taken care of. How that's going to look, we don't know. Wyatt, the home we live in, part of the reason we bought it was because it had a mother-in-law suite, so to speak, a basement area that we could, at one point, if Wyatt needed to live with us. Chess has been his passion and something he's really good at, and it's the one way we see him connect with other kids. And we've talked to him already about maybe he could be a chess instructor, just different things to that he gets excited about and we get excited about. But it's one of those things we know is coming, and we're already having to look into it because the options are few. And we're kind of looking to those that are ahead of us to see what they're doing and what's out there and what we need to be doing to prepare.
Okay, so now you just helped us step towards something, and that is this idea of the support team, the community support team. Alicia, you mentioned your dad, and others that I've listened to and heard their stories. I've heard of aunts and uncles and grandparents and friends at work and people who were maybe not directly the caregiver, but they saw a role they could play in offering support. So let's talk about that. What if you could say one thing, here's something that really supports us, that supports our family. I realize not every family will be supported exactly the same way. But, Alicia, you mentioned something there. You mentioned other people that you kind of look at them ahead of you down the path and start imagining. So why don't each one of you just share a little bit about meaningful support? What does meaningful support look like for you and for your family? Amanda, do you want to start us off?
Certainly. So up until now, probably the most meaningful support that I've had with Joey, and I just want to also say briefly that I felt like a single parent since this started, because Joey's father just believed that he was going to grow out of this and not to worry about it. And it was actually hard to spend funds on occupational therapists and speech therapists and things like that. The greatest support that we've had really, was the North Atlanta Youth Group and Joey getting to go on some of the trips,
Yes.
and the retreats.
Yes.
That's probably been the biggest thing for Joey in his life up until now. I believe that family members will be helpful in the future. One of my sisters says, she'll take care of his finances. My daughter, she's 30 now. She knows that at some point after I'm gone that she may be physically responsible for Joey at some points, depending on, what's going on. But it's scary. It's scary.
Yes.
I had Joey when I was in my 30s. So I'm always worried. But, and Joey loves school. Joey loves what he gets at school, and Joey feels, very much a part of Dunwoody High School, and that's been a great experience for him. So those are the best supports, the social supports,
Yes.
up until now.
Yes. Frank, can you share a little bit about ways you've been supported and ways that are meaningful to support you and your family?
I want to Well, the ladies group that Tina meets with has been a tremendous support emotionally and mentally. And that's one of the things about having a child with special needs is the emotional and mental drain.
Mm.
And they have given her and there are members of the church who I've been able to talk to just to overcome the sheer weight of the mental and spiritual weight that in responsibility. And that's been very helpful.
Yes. Frank, in a previous conversation with some of the folks on this call, you described something that I would like for us to revisit. You
Okay.
talked about wearing wearing a mask, not a COVID-19 mask, but wearing a mask.
The emotional mask of everything is fine, everything is great, we're able to cope. And it's easy to put that on because you feel like you almost have to project that face because you don't want, because again, because you don't want to be thinking yourself or others thinking of you as a failure as a parent. And the thing is, and it gets harder and harder because again, children with special needs or disabilities are extraordinarily mentally, physically, emotionally, and materially draining.
Mm-hmm. Is it hard for you to say that sometimes and to share that openly?
Yes, it is, because again, we like to, keep ourselves projecting a certain image, even if it's a false image. It's one of the great temptations Satan lets us indulge in.
Yeah. Frank, in that conversation, as we were preparing to do this series, and right now, there aren't words to capture how powerful and impacting what you just said is. Not just for families who are navigating the journey that is similar to yours, but for everyone. This thing in society that makes us want to project ourselves a certain way, to try to mask how we might be feeling about something, because it can be very fearful that someone will kind of put a benchmark at our lowest moment. They will imagine that if they've seen us in a downtime, that that's how we always are. That if we're honest about the depth of the difficulty, they forget that we also have celebrations. Your wife, Tina, is, of course, on another one of these conversations.
That's correct.
I remember her describing the difference in your particular journey of some of the things that raising a child would involve. Some of the typical things, learning how to eat, potty training, different things like that. And that I remember she said that, yes, it took longer. Yes, it was more difficult, but the victory was so sweet that we could celebrate with great joy. And I think that's part of why I think these conversations are vital, is to have the full conversation, Beth, I'd like you to start us off on the next question, and that is advocating. So we've heard it a couple of times. Some people can advocate for themselves, and some people are not able to advocate for themselves. right?
Right.
And so what I'd ask you to do is to talk about that. Now, if you can hold on just a moment, I just looked outside and I have a repair person of all things that just walked up. Put a pause in it. I will come back to this moment, to that question. Give me 1 second.
Okay.
See this guy out my window. Hold on, I'll be right back.
Did we play the Jeopardy final question music or what? So how are you guys doing?
We're good. I'm good. I'm good. How about you, Frank?
Yeah, I'm getting bored because, you know, and mainly because my job's not letting me know when we're going to be coming back.
I was going to ask, are you doing any work from home or?
Well, I have certain restrictions that, you know, that there's only certain types of jobs I can take, and I have to get permission to take those jobs. And with the office being closed, I can't get permission. It's one of those, So, if this, what I'm thinking of doing is seeing what I can volunteer for. There's no restriction on volunteering.
For sure. For sure.
Goodness gracious. Okay, we're good. Sorry about that. I have been trying to get this guy out here to service an air conditioner, and that has been difficult in COVID-19, right?
Yeah.
It's one of those 4-hour window deals. I will show up between this and this, and then and I can see him out there kind of trying to see if anybody's around. So, oh my goodness. Thank you. Sorry. Okay, let's come back to this. Beth, what I left you with was the question about advocacy. And part of what we recognize is some people are able to advocate for themselves, can somewhat advocate for themselves. And for some, the disability that they're navigating could potentially mean that all of the advocacy has to come through someone else. And so what are some things you have learned about different ways that a person with a disability can advocate for themselves, and then families and other people like yourself can join in advocacy?
Well, I mean, it starts with this kind of forum, right? It starts with educating ourselves as teachers, as parents, as friends, as family, church community. It's being intentional. It's being curious. It's wanting to learn, wanting to help, wanting to serve, especially for those who are not able to advocate for themselves. I mean, we have to educate ourselves. You know, I mean, it's imperative. And that's why I'm so thankful for this moment, for this opportunity. There's got to be an awareness, you know, even especially at church, even in our Bible classes, having the discussion with our with our teachers about how we all learn differently. And I think specifically at North Atlanta, I think that's where maybe the conversation needs to start, is really talking to our teachers and having some training, being super intentional about it, how these kids are wired, how do they learn? I mean, you figure 1 in 5 people has dyslexia. So, I mean, and I always say those are kind of the fall through the cracks kids, like especially in a public school environment. So even that is important to know, like, you know, just kind of how they're wired again. It's honestly just having that honest conversation like now, right? So we can all be an advocate for each other and for our kids and for those that, you know, it's just for a community. I think it's super important. Again, with the kids that I work with dyslexia, the first time we meet, our very first time together, even at Swift or some other specific schools that serve those specific students, you have the honest conversation. Like, what is dyslexia? What does this mean? What does this look like? Right? And we talk about people that have dyslexia, and kind of where they've gone on in their career and their life, and being an advocate for themselves, even if it's just in the classroom or with other students, you know, being an advocate, talking about it. I feel like sometimes those kids have such anxiety that they do believe that whatever they are dealing with, whether it's the anxiety, the dyslexia, or people think they're using it as a crutch, and that's so not the case. That's just how they are built.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, I do believe that we just need to educate ourselves. And that's the biggest, in my opinion, the biggest advocacy is education.
Okay. And something you've also touched on is it is estimated that 61 million Americans, and that's 26% of our population, are navigating a significant disability. And 1 billion people worldwide, according to what I could understand from the research that the CDC has compiled, between 70 and 90% of that is what they refer to as an invisible disability. And so I think part of us educating ourselves is realizing that, just as you all mentioned, that you begin to wonder, what am I seeing? With your own child, what am I seeing? Is this a dance, or is this a sign of autism? Is this the development that someone will grow out of, or has something happening that requires further diagnosis, right? So what about, as far as parents, Alicia, what are some ways that you have learned to advocate for Wyatt specifically, but also for your family and so on?
Yeah, you brought it up a little earlier. I've been fortunate that Joe and I are on the same page. And so we've got each other and we both, you know, from having friends whose children were diagnosed with autism at a later point, that kind of went into the denial, we kind of took a different approach to it. And we were fortunate. Wyatt was a part of the Emory Autism Center. He went to Walden for 4.5 years, and they come with us as our advocates when he transitioned to public school. So we had them. I think more so than Joe, but I've joined a lot of support groups, both for autism and dyslexia, and even ADHD. All 3 of our kids have ADHD, and I'm in support groups for all of those.
Yes.
And to help me learn more about each of those and what I need to be asking for, because if you don't know what to ask for, you're just going to get whatever they give you, and that's not always what's best. So I do believe education is number one, but I think having support of people that have been there and have far more experience with this than we do is where I look to help us understand it better and know better how to advocate for our children.
Mm-hmm. And Amanda, you were nodding your head there at different points, but I wasn't exactly sure. Tell us and as far as the advocacy journey in your own life, what are some things that you've learned and seen?
Well, one of the things I've learned is that if I go to an IEP meeting, especially when Joey was younger, without some backup, some support behind me, that I'm not even going to know what I need to ask for. So, you know, early on, Joey went to a special private school for a few years, and it really helped him. They used applied behavioral analysis to motivate him to speak and to gain a lot of skills that he was missing. But it came to a point where some of the kids at that school had behavioral problems that were so extreme that I had to make the decision to bring Joey back into the public school system. Mm-hmm. So when I did that, I hired a disabilities attorney, and for several years, I brought that person into the meeting. Mm-hmm. Now, it's not an inexpensive endeavor. It's expensive, but you know, I was able to feel more confident, and she was able to ask questions that I would not have thought of. I feel like all of Joey's teachers have been excellent, but the school wants everything done at the lowest cost.
Mm-hmm.
And so sometimes the needs of the child are overlooked.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the other advocacy is, sometimes it's not taken very well, when I speak up for Joey,
Mm-hmm.
but, when I advocated with the leaders in the youth ministry for Joey to start attending the retreats and things, that was a big turning point for Joey to be able to do
Yes.
something and to be with other friends. Now, you can't always stay engaged with everything that's going on, but just being there with people his age, that meant so much to both myself and to Joey. And, that was just tremendous. Advocating for social opportunities for Joey. I think one of the hardest things that I've dealt with, there are some kids that call Joey, but, and he's got some best buddies at school that reach out to him. But, a lot of times people will say, hey, Joey, you can come over for dinner one night, or, hey, Joey, we'll go do this. And it never materializes. And I think that's been the hardest thing, is that, everybody needs connection. Everybody needs connection. And to be honest with you, even in my family, it hasn't been great with the kids his age. They don't really know what to do. He's got a nephew that's 2 weeks different from him, 2 weeks apart in age from him. And that kid is not equipped. He doesn't know what to do. And it's usually me asking, hey, why don't you call Joey and go to a movie and I'll pay for it, So it's kind of, that has been just the day-to-day life advocacy is also difficult.
Yes. You've brought up a profound point. I think all of us, I can say I was so drawn into that, what you just did there, that movement from advocacy in kind of the system and, navigating the IEP or whatever, down to navigating just daily advocacy for life. And I really appreciate you, all of you, bringing that up. Frank, let's shift our attention to something you touched on earlier, but I want to return to it now, the spiritual journey. What are some things that you have discovered, encountered, wrestled with in your relationship with God that you can see were either initiated by or directly impacted by raising a son with disabilities?
The main problem was just accepting the situation as it is and as it was, because again, we all have all these expectations of what will be, and this is a major let's see, Job-like moment where the house comes crashing in. But one of the great things about having Matthew is that it refines you. It makes you become stronger as you work through this. Because you just have to do things. You have to just step up to the plate and do things that you didn't think you could do before. And that spiritual journey has been rather difficult, but I think both me and Tina, my wife, have become much better persons because of me.
Wow.
Me especially.
Frank, you are an amazing husband and father and brother. It's awesome. And I think we all probably resonated with the word you used and a phrase you used, refined as you work through it. Right. the refinement isn't like a light switch on the wall that click and all of a sudden we transition to everything we wish we were. But it's ongoing.
No, refinement is a very complex process if you ever study it, and it takes a lot of time, effort, and struggle.
Mm. Yes.
And it's slow.
Yes.
And there's quite a few, stop points, and to sit there and not, no apparent change occurs.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Amanda, can you pick up on that and talk a little bit about the spiritual side of things and the spiritual journey for you?
Certainly. So, oftentimes my mind goes to, be worried for nothing. And other topics like that. I mean, all in all, if I didn't have a strong faith, I know somehow, I don't know how, but somehow everything's going to be all right. And everything is already all right. I know that. At the same time, I also know there's no day off from autism, and, my life as I saw it with me, being a gourmet cook in the kitchen and doing these things, my life isn't that slow. Everything has to be fast. Everything's been changed to meet his needs. But at the same time, one of my greatest worries, I believe that God would not forsake a child like Joey or any child because they couldn't make a decision. But one of the greatest moments of my life was when Joey made the decision to be baptized. Yeah. And that was something that we'd been talking about for many years. He'd been talking with Justin and Kendra about it for a long time. And when they called me and told me, hey, he has made the decision and he's doing it, and, video that, and you were there, Don. You were there for that, amazingly enough. That was a moment where I knew that God was hearing my prayers and that he could do a great work in Joey and in me. It was sort of miraculous.
Yeah, that was a great day and an awesome hug. I will never forget when Joey was baptized in the Gulf. Down there at Gulf, around Gulf, or we were down there around Panama City Beach, and it was amazing. So, and it was cold. It was very cold, surprisingly enough. But awesome. And Alicia, tell us a little bit about the spiritual journey for you.
Yeah, it's changed a bit over the years. I think early on it was a lot of why me, why us, why him. It led to depression. I led with depression. Well, I still deal with depression, but it started with all that, which kind of took me on a whole different journey spiritually. But I do think that, again, Joe, I think it's kind of made us stronger because we do depend on one another so much that I think from a marriage standpoint, it's helped. I would like to say, I think the church has come a long ways as well with that. When Wyatt was young, Joe and I flew up to Raleigh and toured Brooks Avenue. Church of Christ has a very wonderful special needs ministry, and we went and spent a day with the family there that started it and toured and went to dinner with them. And I remember coming back here and meeting with some folks from the church and being so excited, could we do something like this? And we didn't have room, we didn't have space. And I've seen so much evolve since then. I can see where you guys are going and that it is becoming I know with the new plans, the new vision of the church. And I've seen that in kids too. I feel like kids are becoming more compassionate. I'm not seeing the bullying that I anticipated for Wyatt. I have to share this real quick because I think this is so powerful. One of the kids that Wyatt plays chess with, I had a conversation with his mother about how wonderful her son is with my son. Again, most kids don't know what to do with Wyatt. And he told me that he wasn't always like that, but there was a kid in his class who had a bald head, cancer, and he got in trouble one day at school for making fun of him. And his mother sat down with him and had a conversation about, people that are different and how we should treat people. And she made him shave his head completely as solidarity for this kid. And he did it. And she said that did it. He had a whole other outlook and compassion for other kids. And I just thought that was so powerful. But I've been really lucky to see that in the church and in friends and school. And that has helped me spiritually too, to feel welcome and comfortable. Like I can go and worship there and not have to worry about Wyatt.
Wow. That's beautiful. And thank you. And thank you for connecting your own spiritual journey with the people around you, and their spiritual journey. And something that I was touched by Amanda's comments that go together with yours is that sometimes the socialization that we're working on with the student or child that has disabilities, we need to remember that the socialization has to be worked on the other side. To your point about this incredible example of this mother, or to Beth's point about education. It's not just self-education, but it is the education of those around us. And it's the, equipping, right? As we kind of begin to turn to the final few moments here, Beth, how has your faith been impacted by your life in serving families and people with disabilities?
I mean, the first thing that comes to my mind is seeing Matthew sitting in the front row at church.
Yeah.
I mean, there were just so many moments where I remember, because he knows where Mark and I sit. So, he would intentionally turn around and look for us and wave at me. I mean, those moments, come on.
Yeah.
So, for sure. I mean, just seeing the light in him, and that is his gift. That is his spiritual gift. He's just a light, right? I mean, that's Jesus right there is shining through him. And Joey's baptism. I mean, I watched that video, oh my goodness, probably 2 or 3 times. And every time it was just moving and I was weeping. And so Joey, what you've done, I love that you're right there, because what you've done and how you teach through your example and just being present, you are amazing. You are a light and you are an example to everybody that meets you. And so I know I'm super touched by all of that. And I think it's just so amazingly powerful, more than words. It's just how these kids shine. And I agree with you, Amanda. I love that. I know when Matthew entered the youth group, Justin and Kendra were so intentional, and they reached out to me specifically just because I'd worked with Matthew, in elementary, and we just had the conversation. I mean, they were so intentional, and they wanted Matthew to be an integral part of that ministry. What would that look like? And I love that they did that, because that conversation started a long time ago, and it was powerful. It was beautiful. And Alicia, I'm so thankful that you're seeing that at North Atlanta, because there's been so many prayers lifted up over these kids and our kids, our families. And it's amazingly unique, I think, too. I've been super blessed by the moments I've had with Joey, with Matthew, and just some of the other kids that have come through North Atlanta and through our student ministry, whatever that looks like. So for me personally, it's been amazing.
Yeah. You know, Joey, at your baptism, many people talk about what a difference you make in their life, that you are there to listen to them, the way that you love them, the way that you greet people, make people feel welcome. Many, many people said that Joey was the person that made them feel welcome and included. And so I think that's very, very powerful, you know. Is there anything that any of you would like to say as we close out? Just that final few thoughts that you'd like to share. Let's start with you, Alicia. Any final thoughts that you want to share?
I just, again, happy to have the conversation. I think this is really important, and I'm super excited to hear from people like Frank and Amanda and people that have done this before us, and again, give us lots of hope for Wyatt. And, you know, we've gotten to know some of the other families at church that are closer to our age who also have kids on the spectrum, and we're in this together. And it's also a great way to encourage others that are looking for a place that they can be comfortable. But I'm just, again, I look to these others to lead the way, and it gives me a lot of hope. And I appreciate you having this conversation and including us.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for including me on the journey, right? Amanda and Joey, do you have any final words you'd like to share?
I'm really glad we're having the conversation, and you know, I certainly hope that it does provide hope to families that are just coming into this journey, and families that are facing changes in this journey. You know, every age group has its different you know, solutions that we have to come up with. Also, you know, just the opportunity to say, hey, you know, I mean, you know, Frank talked about the mask. You know, sometimes all I can do is just say, yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine. You know, but just for people to know maybe that we're not always fine. We're not always fine. And we're trying to maybe make things a little easier for them, you know. And
yes.
But, you know, all in all, just the opportunity to share about it, the advocacy, and that the church actually cares specifically about a group of people that may or may not be able to advocate for themselves is an amazing thing. So that's very much appreciated.
Amen. In it together, right?
Yes.
Frank?
Well, that it's important to have a sense of community where we can be honest, we can share, we can be real, and we can really address, you know, things. And sometimes just get so stubborn that, you know, we put Missouri mules to shame in accomplishing what we need to do.
Yes. Yes. Thank you, Frank. Thank you. Beth?
So finally, I think just, again, I'm so thankful to be a part of this conversation. I agree. I think it's conversation. I think it's equipping, it's educating, it's loving on each other, and it's remembering to not only love on our kids, but to love on the families, and just to be super mindful of the day-to-day, and the day-to-day joys, and maybe the days that aren't so great. But I think so. I'm so thankful for you as families for having that discussion, because that helps me be super mindful of that.
Yes.
I don't have a child with any disabilities. I have a niece who is dyslexic, but just being reminded of your day to day, I'm super thankful for that. As an educator, but more importantly, as a fellow sister, as a sister.
Amen.
So I'm super thankful for that.
Thank you. Well, Joey, do you have anything you want to say as we close out?
Joey.
And when I saw the video, it got like 800 views.
Chat, there's a video.
It went up because of you, Joey.
Like it got like reposted so many times.
Yep. Yep.
I love that.
Wasn't that exciting?
Yeah.
I know. I know. Well, Joey, you have that beautiful impact on people. And thank you for joining us. I want to say thank you to all of you who joined in the conversation today, and for all of the listeners who are going to be listening to this podcast. The 3-part series on disabilities, as well as the conversations that have been developed. There are 5 total conversations. One with Ryan Lee, a person on the autism scale who is a powerful advocate in the Atlanta area. These 3 family conversations where different people have been sharing. And then the final installment is actually 2 of our folks who work directly in Georgia government and in advocacy. And they share powerful ways that we can advocate for people and families. And so again, I want to thank you for joining us for the Love First podcast. And we would love for you to go to lovefirst.org and see the other ways that you can join in and find a home at North Atlanta. Thank you.
Love first, I know.